My name is Peggy Castro, and I'm going to present one of my favorite poets today. Her name is Mary Oliver, and for me, she's a very special poet because she was very closely inspired by nature and interconnected with nature. She took many long walks where she lived with her partner, Molly Malone Cook, off the shores of the Atlantic in Massachusetts. She retreated to nature after being molested as a child. She writes of making a conscious decision to be happy, which she was. She was very happy, and she lived a happy life. And again, she drew her strength from nature and from her partner. And she did attend college, but she dropped out. And after that, she worked as a secretary for Edna St. Vincent's Millay's sister. And from there, she went into writing her own poetry. She's won numerous awards. She lived from September 10, 1935 to January, she died in January 17th, 2019. And these poems reflect that conscious decision she made to be happy. And it wasn't easy, but I'm going to include a quote by Albert Einstein that sort of sums it up. Albert Einstein once said, "There are two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle." And Mary Oliver lived her life as though everything was a miracle. And I'm going to start with two poems that show just how difficult. She doesn't normally write about how difficult it was, but she wrote one that she's well known for, and I mentioned it, I read it the last time I read both of these, and I'm going to repeat them because I think they're very important. She wrote one called The Journey, and it goes, "One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. 'Mend my life,' each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night in the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could, determined to save the only life you could save." So that's what she went through, and she came to the conclusion that she couldn't save anyone else, she could only save herself. And it was not an easy choice. And Wild Geese is one of her best poems, and it just sort of sums it all up. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calling to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So I'm going to read a long autobiographical poem that goes, it's autobiographical, and it does cover the choice she made. It's not a direct poem. It's a wonderful, indirect, rambling poem. So it's called Flare, and she starts out with one. Welcome to the silly, comforting poem. It is not the sunrise, which is a red rinse, which is flaring all over the eastern sky. It is not the rain falling out of the purse of God. It is not the blue helmet of the sky afterwards, or the trees, or the beetle burrowing into the earth. It is not the mockingbird who in his own cadence will go on sizzling and clapping from the branches of the catnip that are so thick with blossoms, that are billowing and shining, that are shaking in the wind. 2. You still recall sometimes the old barn on your great-grandfather's farm, a place you visited once and went into all alone while the grown-ups sat and talked in the house. It was empty, or almost. Wisps of hay covered the floor, and some wasps sang at the window, and maybe there was a strange fluttering bird high above, disturbed, hooing a little, and staring down from a messy ledge with wild binocular eyes. Maybe, though, it smelled of milk and the patience of animals, the give-offs of the body were still in the air, a vague ammonia, not unpleasant. Mostly, though, it was restful and secret, the roof high up and arched, the boards unpainted and plain. You could have stayed there forever, a small child in the corner, on the last raft of hay, dazzled by so much space that seemed empty but wasn't. Then you remember, you felt the rap of hunger. It was noon, and you turned from that twilight dream and hurried back to the house where the table was set, where an uncle patted you on the shoulder for welcome, and there was your plate at the table. 3. Nothing lasts. There is a graveyard where everything I am talking about is now. I stood there once on the green grass scattering flowers. 4. Nothing is so delicate or so finely hinged as the wings of the green moth against the lantern, against its heat, against the beat of the crow in early morning. Yet the moth has trim and feistiness and not a drop of self-pity, not in this world. 5. My mother was the blue wisteria. My mother was the mossy stream out behind the house. My mother, alas, alas, did not always love her life. Heavier than iron it was as she carried it in her arms from room to room. Oh, unforgettable. I bury her in a box in the earth and turn away. My father was a demon of frustrated dreams, was a breaker of trust, was a poor thin boy with bad luck. He followed God, there being no one else who would listen. Listen, this was his life. I bury it in the earth. I sweep the closets. I leave the house. 6. I mention them now. I will not mention them again. It is not lack of love, nor lack of sorrow, but the iron thing they carried, I will not carry. I give them 1, 2, 3, 4, the kiss of courtesy, of sweet thanks, of anger, of good luck in the deep earth. May they sleep well, may they soften. But I will not give them the kiss of complicity. I will not give them the responsibility for my life. 7. Did you know that the ant has a tongue with which to gather in all it can of sweetness? Did you know that? 8. The poem is not the world. It isn't even the first page of the world, but the poem wants to flower like a flower. It knows that much. It wants to open itself like the door of a little temple, so that you might step inside and be cooled and refreshed, and less yourself than a part of everything. 9. The voice of the child crying out of the mouth of the grown woman is a misery and a disappointment. The voice of the child howling out of the tall, bearded, muscular man is a misery and a terror. 10. Therefore, tell me, what will engage you? What will open the dark fields of your mind like a lover at first touching? 11. Anyway, there was no barn, no child in the barn, no uncle, no table, no kitchen, only a long, lovely field of bobolinks. What loneliness comes stalking, go into the fields. When loneliness comes stalking, go into the fields, consider the orderliness of the world. Notice something you have never noticed before, like the tambourine sound of the snow cricket whose pale green body is no longer than your thumb. Stare hard at the hummingbird in the summer rain, shaking the water sparks from its wings. Let grief be your sister. She will, whether or no. Rise up from the stump of sorrow and be green also like the diligent leaves. A lifetime isn't long enough for the beauty of this world and the responsibilities of your life. Scatter your flowers over the graves and walk away. Be good-natured and untidy in your exuberance. In the glare of your mind, be modest and beholden to what is tactile and thrilling. Live with the beetle and the wind. This is the dark bread of the poem. This is the dark and nourishing bread of the poem. So you can see from that, from her sort of referring to her parents and her past, how she made a conscious decision to leave behind the sadness and the misery and embrace nature and the miracle that Albert Einstein talked about. And I'm going to read two more poems by her. They're not as long, but again, she repeats herself. The poet with his face in his hands. You want to cry aloud for your mistakes, but to tell the truth, the world doesn't need any more of that sound. So if you're going to do it and can't stop yourself, if your pretty mouth can't hold it in, at least go by yourself across the 40 fields and the 40 dark inclines of rock and water in the place where the falls are flinging out their white sheets like crazy. And there is a cave behind all that, jubilation and water fun, and you can stand there under it and roar all you want, and nothing will be disturbed. You can drip with despair all afternoon, and still on a green branch, its wings just lightly touched by the passing foil of the water, the thrush puffing out its spotted breast will sing of the perfect stone-hard beauty of everything. So again, she doesn't run away from sorrow, but she finds beauty in nature that encompasses it. And this is the last poem by her that I'm including. It's called Black Oaks. Okay, not one can write a symphony or a dictionary or even a letter to an old friend full of remembrance and comfort. Not one can manage a single sound, though the blue jays carp and whistle all day in the branches, without the push of the wind. But to tell the truth, after a while I'm pale with longing for their thick bodies ruckled with lichen, and you can't keep me from the woods, from the tonnage of their shoulders and their shining green hair. Today is a day like any other 24 hours, a little sunshine, a little rain. Listen, says Ambition, nervously shifting her weight from one boot to another. Why don't you get going? For there I am in the mossy shadows under the trees. And to tell the truth, I don't want to let go of the risks of idleness. I don't want to sell my life for money. I don't even want to come in out of the rain. So that's Mary Oliver. I recommend you look her up. I got these from Devotions. It's just a collection of her poems, and wonderfully, wonderfully refreshing, especially considering all that we're dealing with today. And I wrote my take on it, how I made a conscious decision. And this was before coronavirus and before elections, but still we were dealing with the same things. My country is riddled with the diseases of racism, capitalism, and runaway egos, and the prayer of democracy, clinically schizoid, the heartbreaking split between hope and reality. I am witness to the butterfly effect. A single virus throws the world, and especially my country, into chaos, and all I have to offer are these prayers. In the cool shadow of the sun, I drink my coffee, focusing on a burst of dahlias, pinpointing the way to sanity. So take a look at these poems and look up some more and see if you can make a decision to look at the miracle, not ignore it. And it's hard. It's very, very hard, but it's really worthwhile. Thank you.